Okay, well, we are live, and I'll just start by maybe waiting maybe a minute or so before we start, and then we can introduce ourselves and go from there. So, this is- um, let's see. Um, okay, I think this is enough. Let's get started. I'm Danu, and I'm an immigration lawyer, and as you all know, if you're on my page, you've been following me, you should know that I've been, I've started doing live streams with some other professionals in various areas of law because I think that immigration law really does touch on a lot of different areas of law. And then today Jyoti Palapotu and Jyoti and I are very, very good friends. We've known each other for many, many years. And we've really seen our careers and our expertise develop. And so I'm really excited to introduce Jyoti, who is a real estate attorney. She will introduce herself. Actually, I'll just let you introduce yourself, Jyoti.
Thank you, Danu. I'm honored that you asked me to be on this live stream and this discussion. I'm very excited to talk about real estate. As you stated, I am a real estate attorney here in Illinois. It's an important state I'm in Illinois because each state is very specific on its rules. So I wanted to put that out right away that a lot of the things I will be discussing today will be Illinois centric. But yes, I have been practicing since 2010, and I've been in this real estate under the real estate umbrella since then. I do a lot of closings. I assist buyers and sellers in buying homes, commercial properties. Today we'll be focusing more on the individual, and if we're buying homes like residential homes. I also defend foreclosures. I've been doing that since the '08 crash, my very first job. So I've been enmeshed in that since then, and been really able to see how the law has progressed and evolved in that area as well.
Yeah. So that brings up a very, very good point, Jyoti, that you brought up about, that you are from Illinois and you practice in Illinois, because, like you said, unlike immigration law, which is federal, and we have clients from all over the country or even world, Jyoti's practice is local. And so if you are looking for someone to represent you in a different state, um, they need to find a local real estate attorney. Is that right?
That is correct. Every state has different laws, rules, and procedures. A lot of the attorneys were all licensed in individual states. So if you're in a different state other than Illinois, and something I say is intriguing, you might want to reach out to a local, like Dana said, an attorney licensed in your state, so they know your state's rules and regulations.
Right. Yeah, that's a good starting point. Let's talk a little bit about, Illinois and all the different factions. Well, immigrants, obviously, when they move to the U.S., whether they have a green card or a visa or any other status, at some point will maybe want to settle down, have a family, maybe purchase a home, maybe invest in real estate in some way. Um, what are some things that you think are relevant for immigrants to know when they are looking to invest in some kind of real estate?
Okay. Well, here in Illinois, if first people who come to the United States for whatever reason, usually it's always for a better life. And, we all have the American dream. I'm a big proponent of home ownership, and everybody deserves shelter. So definitely home ownership is a goal for a lot of people. I won't say everybody, but for those that do want to buy a house and establish roots here, the first step, there's several steps involved in purchasing a house. There's several people involved, entities involved, and we all take it step by step, but we're all a team working together with the person buying the home. So if an immigrant has moved here, it's probably everything's new, everything's brand new. It's a daunting process. So I always suggest work with the professionals. We are trained to guide you through this process and make it less stressful. I've had a lot of people that come in and say, yeah, I know everything. And then I start asking them questions or this, and then all of a sudden, no, I don't know. So you see, there's a lot of information out there that people are here to help you with, including lawyers and realtors and closing agents. So the first step when you're buying a house, of course, you want to, I would suggest get pre-approved for a mortgage, see how much you can afford. The reason why I say that is because sometimes we get super excited when we see our fantasy homes or beautiful homes and think we can afford that, but you never want to be house poor, basically, where you own this huge house, but then you can't live your life in any other way. So I would always suggest seeing how much if you're paying cash, that's one thing, but most of us do need to get a mortgage, which is a loan that we need from a bank to buy a house. So my first suggestion is always see what you can get pre-approved for.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, especially when they are new to this process in the United States, they don't know if they need to have an attorney if they're on the buyer's side, or is the seller's attorney going to be enough to help them?
Okay, so yes, I always suggest everybody gets their own attorney. You want someone that's only for you. You don't want someone that's on the seller side and then, whoever hired, if you trust the seller side, well, they're working for the seller, not you. They don't have your best interests in mind. So whether you're selling a home or buying a home, everybody should have their own attorney. And honestly, it's not that expensive. I know people think, oh, attorneys cost a lot of money, but here in Illinois, it's not that bad compared to the amount you're spending on a home. And, especially if you have a 30-year loan or 15-year loan, that's a long time to get it, to be connected to a loan and signing documents that you don't even know. So yes, you definitely want your own attorney.
So in general, a real estate attorney for, say, a buyer, would they cost something around 1,000, 10,000, or what kind of ballpark are people?
I'm going to give you the most lawyer answer ever. It depends. Okay, it depends. It depends on the attorney, their experience, how much they charge. That's why, I could give a number. Anywhere from 500 to 1,000 or more or less. See, that's such a generic answer, but talk to the attorneys, and you don't have, just because you talk to attorneys doesn't mean you have to hire them right away. Do your research, ask the questions, and of course, one of the questions is how much do you charge? Now, there are some attorneys that charge less. There are some that charge more. So I always say, do what makes you comfortable. Don't go with the cheapest or, just because they're cheap. You want to have a good rapport with that attorney, have a good back and forth, feel comfortable with them. And that's more what you want than,
and that makes a lot of sense, because you're investing, somewhere, depending on the kind of property you're buying, it could be 500,000, it could be 100,000, or it could be more. And you're talking about very large numbers here. So by comparison, any kind of professional that people will choose will be far less, and I think very, very worth it to protect your interest in that property. Am I right?
Yes. One of the big things I see about finding an attorney is communication. You don't want to be left in the dark. I've heard so many stories where I didn't know who my attorney was. I just got some emails, and then I see them at closing, and the closing was really fast. Just sign this, sign this. What are you signing? You're not reading it. You're hiring us to read it and explain it. So that's why I say ask the questions. If you're not happy with the communication style, then definitely find somebody else. There's plenty of attorneys out there.
Now, a lot of people maybe don't know the difference between what a real estate attorney does versus what an agent would do. So where does the agent responsibility and the attorney responsibility begin?
Okay, so like I said earlier, we're all a team, but just like any team, some of us players in the team have our moment to shine and take control of the process. So usually when we discuss, the first step is to get pre-approved. I highly suggest that. Now, some people don't do that, but I highly suggest that because we don't want to fall in love with a place that we can't afford. So now that you know how much money you're able to get a loan for, and how much it can affect your budget and impact your finances, if you can afford it, then go look for a house within that range. So when you're looking for a house, you want to get a realtor, an agent. Realtors and agents, they're the first, they're the next step after getting pre-approved, but they're actually the first step in actually looking at houses. Agents are very important in the fact that they will negotiate things for you at the very beginning level. They'll show you around, look at things. Maybe they'll see things with their expert eye that we don't know to look for. Maybe defects in the house or good things to point out. And you can tell them your wish list, and they're there to find that home for you. So once you have an agent, that's the first step, and you're ready, you find your home, you're ready to make an offer, the agent will create all the contract and the documents for you to sign to enter into that purchase agreement and to start the closing process. Now, once that's done, once you sign the contract, actually, when the seller signs the contract, that's when the contract is accepted, the seller date. And so that's why once that happens, then immediately it goes to your attorney. The minute you sign that contract, it goes to your attorney. Because in Illinois, the common contract that's used, has an automatic 5 business day attorney review period that triggers immediately when the seller signs the contract as well. And that's when the attorney comes in. And I can talk about that more in detail.
Right. So what are some things that the attorney would do in that buying or selling process?
Okay, so when you're buying a home, especially like I said, I'm Illinois specific here. In the contract, when you're buying a home, you could be up against so many other buyers. There's competition, and you want to put in your offer, and it's really fast. So you don't get to look at the contract. The contract is anywhere between 20 to 30 pages, depending on how many attachments are there, and it's very, very, very detailed. So that's why you don't get a chance to read it. So this is where the lawyer comes in. After you sign a contract, the lawyer is able to negotiate certain terms, change certain things, make sure everything is on the buyer side, like favorable to the buyer. And during this period, this 5-day period, both sides can negotiate the contract in writing. The attorneys are going back and forth saying, we want to change paragraph 4. We want to adjust paragraph 10. We want to do this and this. And this is also the time where the homeowner, the new home, or the buyer, they get to do a home inspection. And if there's things wrong with the house, then we can ask the seller to fix things, repair them. Now, the one big thing, the misconception that a lot of people seem to have during the attorney review is that whatever we ask, the seller has to do. And that is not correct. It's a negotiation period. So we can ask, and the seller can always say no, or they could say yes. So it's a back and forth. And based on that, what we ask and what the seller responds to, we can decide, do we want to go forward with this contract and buy this house, or do we want to get out of here? And attorney review is very important because it's the one time where either side can freely cancel the contract, the buyer gets their earnest money back, and everyone can move on without any ramifications of canceling this contract.
So you mentioned earnest money. For those of us, the viewers who may not know, what is earnest money?
Okay, earnest money is an amount of money, and it varies between the price of the property and how much both sides agree, but it's usually several $1,000s. And this is something that the buyer, it's almost like a down payment, sort of. It's just basically an amount of money where the buyer is saying, I want this contract, I want this house, so I'm going to give you money to lock in this contract. And that money is used towards your closing costs, by the way. So it's not just, it disappears, it's there, we just put it towards the end cost. But it's kind of like holding your place for this house.
So it's kind of like this non-refundable deposit, except it can be refunded in the attorney review period and certain periods of time.
Yes, and it's also a way of telling the seller, hey, I'm serious about this house and I really want it, so that's why I'm going to give you some money so you can trust me to go through with this. Now, of course, things happen. We're all human, things happen. So there are certain times where, for instance, that attorney review period, if you don't like the house or something, you can cancel it. You get your earnest money back.
Got it.
But yeah, that earnest money is basically a way of instilling trust in the seller that you want this house that bad and you're putting money down to move forward with it, the
Right.
purchase.
So I think, that's a really important point you brought up. Now, for people who are not US citizens, who are here on some kind of a visa, um, are there some things that they need to be aware of that might be different for them versus someone who's a US citizen buying a property or
So
selling a property?
So the buying or selling a property, whether you're a U.S. citizen, a foreign investor, or resident or non-resident here, and I apologize if I'm not using the terms correctly, but the buying and selling process is the same, okay, for everybody. It's not contingent on your status here in the United States.
Hmm.
Now, there are some ramifications for a seller. So, say you're selling your house, okay, you do this contract and everything. Once you close on this house, there could be some IRS taxes that are levied on this property. So, there's this law called the Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act. We call it FIRPA, FIRPTA.
Hmm.
It was passed in 1980, and it basically says if you're a foreign investor or non-resident or a foreign person in the United States, that if you sell a property, 15% of the sale price, not the proceeds, not your profit you get off it, but the actual sale price, has to be set aside and submitted to the IRS. Now, here's the weird part about it is that it's not the seller, so the title company will hold that money back, but it's up to the buyer to withhold and let the IRS know. And there's actually documents you will sign at closing stating that I am a foreign person in the United States. And so that the title company will submit that to the IRS. So you can't get around that. They do that to make sure that the taxes are properly paid, that someone doesn't take the money and abscond. But there are ways to get around that 15%, depending on the purchase price or the sale price of the house. If it's 300,000 or less, it could be reduced to 10%. Sometimes it can be wiped away because if you're a green card holder or a permanent resident here, then you're not considered a foreign person. If you're here on a visa, though, there are ways around this tax. And this you could probably explain more, but I think it was something along the lines of the substantial presence test, how long you've been in the United States. And that's something you might want to explain more than I
So yeah,
can. But
I'm guessing it refers to like the tax rules on what who's considered a resident for
mhm.
tax purposes, and someone who may not be a permanent resident of the United States in the immigration sense or a green card holder may still be considered resident for tax purposes, right?
Correct.
Mhm.
Depending on how long they've been here and whatever the parameters for that substantial presence test are. That may be a way of preventing having to pay that 15% because that is a large amount.
Right, right. And there are a lot of people, especially I know, some people who are Indian nationals, we call them, meaning they were born in India, um, who have a very, very long wait for their green card if they're doing it through the employment process.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times they may not be green card holders, but they will still meet the substantial presence test and be able to still purchase um, a home.
Right. So I think anybody can purchase a home here. It's a
Mhm.
matter of the tax goes into
Oh,
effect when
without the
you're
extra
selling.
tax, right?
Yeah, it would be more when they're selling the home.
When they're selling the home.
Yeah.
Got it. That's when they would either have this extra tax or not.
Right.
Got
Definitely.
it. Yeah. And so, sometimes we face a situation where, especially recently, there have been a number of job losses, and people have had to, as a result, unfortunately, lose their visa status. And, we've had some people who have had to basically exit the country on relatively short notice. So, my question is, as, a practitioner, um, what are some things that they need to keep in mind if they do have to just like up and go on a short notice? Are they able to sell their property if they had to leave before they were able to make the sale?
They can sell their property. Um, in that instance, when there's such a rush or we don't have enough time, I would highly suggest having a power of attorney, giving power of attorney, and not just to anybody. I would suggest give that power of attorney to your actual attorney. So just because you have an attorney doesn't mean they have power of attorney over you. Power of attorney gives them the right to sign and make decisions on your behalf. I frequently do have my clients give me power of attorney to sign their documents, especially buyers or sellers who are out of state. And they don't want to fly in just for a closing. They'll give me the power of attorney. That will be, especially on the buyer side, that may have to be recorded at the local recorder of deeds. That could be a small price, like $100 or something added onto the closing costs. But at least that gives peace of mind for $100 that, hey, I have to move to India, but I can still do this closing. And I can sign on their behalf. Now, when you give someone power of attorney, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to just sign everything, do everything without telling you. No, they would have to discuss with you, review everything, and with your permission, go ahead and sign on your behalf. But yeah, that's one of the ways you can close on a property if it's fast. You can always trust. Now, keep in mind, if you have to leave the property and go to another country, you can still list the property and everything, but you have to have somebody monitor the house to make sure, like, the water's still running or the electricity's open. And that's when your agent would come in and they would be able to let people tour the property and make sure it looks in a decent condition. Maybe stage the property.
So with an agent and a power of attorney given to an attorney, it is possible if somebody had to leave the country on a short notice to still, as long as their professionals have the right tools, they can still make the sale and get the money into their bank account, into their U.S. bank accounts, right?
Yes, that is correct. And of course, if they have to leave the country, then that foreign investor tax kind of kicks in because they're no longer here. So they'd have to keep in mind that if they sell their house for $500,000, 15% of the 500 would have to be placed withheld with the IRS.
Got it. Interesting. So we have a question here. What are some of the guidelines for purchasing an auctioned property?
Okay, that's actually a really good question. So when we talk about auction, there are different types. I'm very familiar with foreclosure auctions because I'm a foreclosure defense attorney. But usually if there's an auction, there's several auction houses. They're private companies that hold auctions, especially here in Illinois, Cook County, and the northern part of Illinois has a lot of these private companies. A lot of the smaller counties, though, they have the sheriff that runs the auction. So the local sheriff's office, the county sheriff, you can go to, like, say you have Lake County here in Illinois, Lake County. You can Google Lake County Sheriff's Auctions, and it'll take you to the page, and it will have a list of all upcoming properties that are going to auction, what time and date that they will be sold at an auction. Okay, so in order to buy an auction property at auction, there are very strict rules about that. So whether the sheriff or a private company is doing that, you need to go to that website and read those specific rules for that specific sale. Okay, usually you have to come to the auction with a check for usually, I think it's about 25% down already, cashier's check. How do you know how much is 25% down if it's an auction? That's the fun part. You figure that out. You're thinking, I think this house is roughly $100,000. I can probably bid $100,000, so I'll bring a $25,000 check. If you are the winner at the auction, if you bid high enough that it's accepted, then you would have to pay within 24 hours the full amount.
Okay. And this is something that's, an interesting intersection between immigration law and property law as well, because what we find is that sometimes, people, for example, again, in this market, a lot of people are facing sudden job losses, and they face a job loss. Maybe they're not able to make payments. They're exploring options like foreclosure. What are some ways that they can responsibly downsize, or if they've made the purchase but they no longer have the money to make the mortgage payments? Okay,
so I always tell people, make those payments until you can't. Don't purposely stop making payments because that causes more problems, okay? Right. There are several options. We call them loss mitigation, where you're mitigating the loss that you may lose the home by working with your lender. So if you have a lender, there are several programs your lender will have. The quickest way, if you're saying, I want to keep this house. I missed a few payments, in the transition from leaving this country, and now I'm in foreclosure. You can do what's called a loan modification. It's basically where you're essentially reapplying for your loan. You submit your bank statements, pay stubs, proof of income, all this stuff, fill out an application, explain why you fell behind, and then you work with the lender, and they'll look at it and they will literally modify the loan and redo the terms. Maybe they'll stretch it another 30 years or whatever they need to do
Mm-hmm.
to be able to give you a payment plan and get back on track.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way to save the property. You're literally once you miss enough payments, the bank will just not take your payments anymore. Or they will, but they won't apply them because they enter into what's called a default process on their end, which means that is you fall behind. When you miss payments or other types of default, it's called a default. You defaulted on your loan. And so when they start their default process, which is the precursor to the foreclosure process, you have to get into some type of agreement with them again to get back on track to save the house.
So
loan
you just missed a few payments and then just get back on track without communicating or going to a
communication is key.
professional.
Yeah, you definitely talk to a foreclosure attorney in your area. But even before we get to foreclosure, which is a court process in Illinois, some states don't have a court process, but Illinois does. There are things you can work on with the lender. Like I said, loan modification is one. There's one called reinstatement, where you're literally saying, hey, bank, how many payments did I miss? How many payments am I behind on? Can you let me know? Can I just pay you a lump sum and pay all that back that I'm behind on and get back on track? So you're reinstating the loan. You give them a lump sum. Of course, when you're behind, it's not just the amount, but also late fees and other charges that could be added on. But as long as you have the property, you can always ask for that number, pay it, and get back on track on your payment plan. Okay. But if there's a safe exit, if you're like, you know what, I don't want this house, I fell behind on my payments, then you can do what's called a short sale or deed in lieu. And those you definitely need an attorney and an agent to assist with, because you're basically giving the deed back to the bank saying, here, take this property, but don't ever come after me for any more money.
Okay.
And one of the things is if you have foreclosure, if you get into that, your credit will take a hit. And so in the future, if you're ever looking back to come to the United States, you might want to leave with a good credit rating, because you leave for India or anywhere, and then a few years later, you get another visa or a good job, and you come back and you want to start your life again here, but you're already facing the ramifications of what you did in the previous years.
Right. And that's actually a really good segue into something that's important for people, for example, who are applying for citizenship, right? So if they're green card holders, they're applying for citizenship, there's a very, very in-depth background check that gets done. And in that background check, they look for things like, do you owe somebody money? Do you owe taxes? Do you owe property taxes? Are you behind on any of your loan payments? Are you facing bankruptcy? Are you, those are some things that are definitely looked into when it comes to applying for citizenship. So one thing that I've always found myself telling clients is, if you have fallen behind and you've gotten off track, just work with a professional to get back on track, right? On the right track. So that, when it comes to citizenship, at least you can show paperwork to say, look, you're working with this lender to, pay off the past owed debt, or you're working with the IRS, to pay off the past owed taxes, or whatever it may be. So it's really important to make sure that you don't just leave those things be, and to work through them in some respect.
One thing I love about this country is that, it's understood that we're human. We make mistakes. Things happen. And even if we didn't purposefully miss our payments, there's always the majority of people I work with, it's not like they went out shopping too much and couldn't make their payments to their mortgage. It's more medical reasons, health, the bills, or they lost their job. So things happen that are out of our control. And I love that this country, we always are able to forgive certain things, especially like if we fall behind our debts. There's always programs to get back on track. And it should not be a shameful thing. That's the one thing I think maybe it could be a cultural or just a human thing. It's the shame that I don't want people to know I fell behind. I don't want this. So reach out. There's reasons why I'm a real estate attorney or foreclosure defense attorney, because I can guide you and provide you with options. And even if I can't provide you with options, I can guide you out of it easily with very little impact to your credit or your history here as
Yeah,
you know.
that's a really, really good point you make. Because a lot of times what I find in our community, especially, there's so much saving face and making sure that
Mhm.
you look good, that a lot of times we're embarrassed to really seek help that we need.
Mhm.
And so, you bring up a really good point that an attorney-client relationship is completely confidential.
Yes.
It doesn't, impact you in your social life in any way that, because of that. And you can actually get the right kind of help if something were to go wrong. And there's nothing shameful about things
Mhm.
not being perfect in life, right?
Yeah. And the good thing with Google and everything is you can look from your home and say, I fell behind on my mortgage or foreclosure attorney or something, and you'll always find, you can reach out. And I do free consultations. So I'm always happy to talk and see how I can help
Right.
people.
And I'm going to put your information on here again because I think if anyone here is in Illinois, Jyoti is a really great resource to ask about any kind of real estate law questions. And, we don't judge our clients. We're not here to judge you. We're here to help you. So, you don't have to be embarrassed to reach out. You just write an email, call Jyoti 312-496-3326. The email is jyoti at jplegalillinois.com. I'm guessing that's also your website, jplegalillinois.com, right? Or is it
Yes, that
JP?
is correct. www.jplegalillinois.com.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So, I think that's a really, really important thing for people to be able to do. And again, for anyone who's joining us late, Jyoti is a real estate attorney. She is in Illinois. I've known her for many, many years. Um, and, I've known her work. I've known how well she advocates for her clients. We're both very passionate about what we do. I'm an immigration attorney. I'm also in Illinois. Jyoti, her practice is state specific. That was a question actually that we just got. Is it so? Her practice is state specific to Illinois, but mine is not. I'm an immigration lawyer, and immigration lawyers can practice all around the world, really, as long as you're talking about inbound U.S. immigration. So people wanting to come to the U.S. From other countries, or people wanting to change their statuses who are citizens of other countries. Um, so I can't help U.S. citizens who are looking to say, go to Canada or seek a visa to Europe or something, or OCI. I get a lot of questions about OCI actually, but that's not something that I can professionally help with. But inbound immigration, that's really what I do. And Jyoti does real estate in Illinois. So if anyone watching here has questions, I mean, you can always put comments on there or reach out to us at our respective contact numbers. We are more than happy to help people who need assistance, who are facing some kind of ramifications based on something that happened, or who are, maybe on the positive end, looking to gain a new property, a new status, something positive for your future. It's really great talking to you, Jyoti, and I appreciate. Want to, of course, give you an opportunity to talk about anything else that you think would be helpful to non-U.S. citizens when it comes to real estate.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to go back. One more thing when we were talking about if someone loses their job, they're here on a visa and they have very limited time to leave. And
Mhm.
we talked about how they can sell their house, definitely using power of attorney and agents here. But
Right.
another thing is they could always rent their property out. Now, you may have to discuss the immigration ramifications of that. But on my end, it's like you can always get like a property management company. There's a lot of them out there, of course, do your due diligence, but they can help you find tenants. take care of the lease and the rent every month. And if you have to evict, they take care of all that for you. So if this is something you want to hold on to and you're thinking, you know what, I'll be back in a couple of years, I want to hold on to this house, it's always good to seek out a management company that'll take care of all this for you. Now, of course, if there's a mortgage, that would still be on you to pay, but with the internet, that can always be done from anywhere.
Right. And actually, that does bring up a really good point about people who are on visas who are looking to rent out property or buy property for investment purposes. I get this question actually a lot too about people wanting to know if something is allowed. Like, say, if they're on an H-1 visa and they're wanting to buy investment properties, is that
Mhm.
allowed? And the rule of thumb, especially for H-1B visas or any H visa, H-1B, H-4, is that, H-4 is different actually, H-1B specifically because it is sponsored by an employer. So the rule there is that they're allowed to do passive investment.
Mm.
They're not allowed to be actively investing. So an example of passive investment would be, you know, long-term rental agreements where they just kind of passively get rent every single month. They don't, sometimes, if something breaks down and they have to be more involved, or if there's a transition, they have to be more involved, but they don't have to be more like very involved every single month. But on the other hand, if you're buying and selling multiple properties or renting out multiple properties, and if you're spending considerable time regularly on these properties, like you're doing Airbnbs or something like that on your own, that's not allowed. So it's
No.
really important in that case to get, as you suggested, a property manager or a team or someone else to do that work for you, so that you as an H-1B holder can be a passive investor.
Mm.
That's an H-1B is just an example. It also holds true for L-1s. But on the other hand, like if you're married and your spouse is on H-4, the H-4 holder, especially with an EAD, which is the employment authorization document, then they can buy and sell and be very actively involved
Mm.
as well. But if they don't have the EAD, then they are restricted also to only passive investment. So yeah, that's how I know real estate can sometimes, especially in hot markets, be a very,
Mm.
very, attractive investment, opportunity. But you have to be careful, like in terms of where the line is between passive and active investment.
I loved hearing all this right now because this is all brand new information to me. Like, yes, I'm a lawyer. Yes, I took an immigration law class a million years ago, that one class. But it's amazing how we have our respective fields that we have chosen to focus on. But it's amazing how everything's so intertwined. So it's always good for me, and I loved learning about this because I also have a lot of clients that are Indian or South Asian that are here looking to buy or sell, and so beyond the whole Foreign Investment Real Property Tax Act, it's good to
Mhm.
know about the passive and active. I did not know that, and it's great information for me to add to my
Yeah,
knowledge base.
the cross field,
Yeah, it's
Mm.
amazing how everything just connects. I never thought it would. To me, when we started this, it was like anybody can buy a place here. Let's just talk about the minutia. But no, you have all these things that I was not even aware of on the back
Mhm.
end. So
Right.
I think that was a very important point you made.
Right. No, I think there's so much crossover in our fields, but sometimes, it is difficult because both of our fields are so vast. I mean,
Mhm.
you know, immigration law is like for me, I feel like once I get into this bubble, it's hard to learn about other things
Mhm.
very easily. But we see these crossovers, and times when all this other knowledge becomes very, very useful for me to do my job, and
Yes.
I'm sure that will at some point maybe come up for you. So, um, you know, um, I think that's interesting because lawyers have to hire lawyers too. You
Oh
know,
yeah, I would never. If I had immigration issues, I would hire you, Dano. I would not try that on my own. I don't
no,
know
and
that.
I'm not doing any real estate transactions on my own either because I'm not reading those contracts. I literally would, hire Jyoti in a flash. So, um, you guys definitely, take some whatever you get from this seminar, of course, but there's so much more. There's so
Yeah,
much
I think
more
we
than
just
we
hit
could
the
talk
tip of the
about in here.
iceberg. Yeah, I could
So,
probably go on for another hour going into details about who does what and this, but that could be another Facebook Live. But for now, I think
exactly.
some very good
Um,
information you gave.
One last question from our commenters. How long does IRS hold the 15% of the purchase price?
Okay, so here I'm going to have to show you my lack of knowledge on this because my experience in closings usually ends at the closing. As any IRS issues, I always tell my clients at closings, talk to a tax professional because I am not a tax professional. I am a
Right,
lot of things, but that is one thing I am not. So
right. I
I
think
would discuss that more
exactly.
in
And
detail.
this is another area where probably real estate and tax law kind of
Mhm.
intersect, but you want to get the best answer for these kinds of questions and not take a chance. You want to ask probably a tax law professional for those kinds of questions. Who
Correct.
knows? Maybe I'll have a tax law attorney on
Hey,
here.
that would be good. There's a lot of things there. And
Yeah.
it's funny. We started off saying, "Oh, it's such a simple process," but now all of a sudden, especially if you are a foreign person or non-citizen here, it's you need an immigration attorney, you need a real estate attorney. Now you probably need a tax professional, whether it's a CPA or a tax
Mhm.
attorney. And people are probably thinking, "Oh my God, all these attorneys!" But at the end of the day, they are protecting you as the buyer or you as the seller from making any mistakes that will affect you in the future.
Right. And I mean, what I've learned too is that, I want to be able to be an expert at what I'm an expert at, right? I don't want to have to be an expert at everything else.
Yes.
Um, so that's why we have other people who are experts at those things.
So yeah, I'm very happy with where I've, taken my area of practice as you are. So yes, definitely. I'm glad that I'm not learning new things. I just don't have the brain capacity.
This is like a contract law question here.
Okay, let's see.
How should one do their due diligence to handle one-sided contracts? And this is, I mean, I think real estate contracts, like one-sided real estate contracts, hiring a real estate attorney, isn't that something you would watch out for, Jyoti? Like if
Yeah. So one thing I want to add something we talked about at the very beginning. So I'm not sure what one-sided contracts mean. I would always, no matter what, contract has to be agreed to by both sides. And
Mhm.
if we go back to contract, let's offer, acceptance, consideration. There are all these factors involved in just a simple contract as well. So how do you handle one-sided contracts? Take it to a lawyer and let the lawyer tell you,
Mhm.
wait a minute, this looks like it's going to benefit the seller more than it's going to benefit the buyer, or vice versa, and here's where we want to make the changes. Or maybe this type of contract isn't even allowed, it's not even legal.
Mhm.
One thing you asked is at the very beginning, like who should have a lawyer? Should we have our own lawyer? There are very certain times where both sides can be represented by one lawyer. It's called dual representation, but that's a
Mhm.
very, very rare um, time that the aspects that you could use. Basically, it's where the seller and the buyer use the same attorney, but that means you're usually buying a property as is. You can't negotiate terms, you can't favor one side over the other. You're just being the
Mhm.
middleman, making sure everything's done, but there's no negotiation between the two. And if both sides are like, yeah, I'll take the house as is and I'm not going to fight over anything, then maybe there's a possibility to save some money that way and have a dual representation. But even that, it's involved with signing documents saying, I understand I'm being represented, by an attorney that's representing the both sides and everything. That's why it's such a rare instance that I always suggest, even with one-sided contracts, don't rely on one attorney. Get your own. Always
Mm.
protect yourself because you
So
want
yeah, so
not for you.
attorney review is great for that. I mean, actually, I do know some people in extremely hot real estate markets that one of the things that was popular was to waive attorney review,
Mm.
and I think that's very risky.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I would never waive attorney review. It's your right. It's written into the contract here in Illinois, anyway. Now, there are states that don't use lawyers. The agents and the title companies take care of everything, but then nobody reads these documents, so and understands them and interprets them in
Hmm.
normal people language, not legalese. So that's why it's always important to have an attorney. We think we always know everything. Look, there are times I don't read the fine print. But if someone
Hmm.
hires me to read the fine print for them, that's my job and my duty to my
Hmm.
clients. So I would definitely suggest.
So this is a bit of interesting knowledge. In India, the tax. I guess the tax for property tax is called TDS, and
Mhm.
it's usually held for 1 year for someone who's an NRI or non-resident Indian.
Oh, okay.
Um, so interesting.
That's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, this was fun. This was fun. I
It is.
learned some new things. Um, I'm hoping our viewers learn some new things from both of us. And, if you guys have any questions, again, I'm just gonna one more time. I'm gonna put out our contact information here. Take a screenshot, take a picture, whatever, and contact us. This is Jyoti's. She's a real estate attorney, and this is mine. I'm an immigration attorney. Um, if you have questions, reach out. We would love to help you. That's what we're here for. Thank you.
Thank you.